Have you ever heard of a room so cursed, so hungry, that everyone who sleeps inside it vanishes without a trace? This is not an urban legend. On the third floor of an old American dormitory, there's a locked door no student dares to touch. Room 313. Every student who stayed there disappeared, leaving behind only whispers and laughter that sounded too much like their own. But one night, a transfer student moved in. He didn't believe in ghosts. He thought the stories were a joke. Until the first night when he heard someone laughing from the empty bed beside him and realized it was his own voice. What happened inside that room is darker than any ghost story you've ever heard. And if you think you're brave enough, stay with me. But remember, sometimes the scariest thing in the dark is yourself. The campus was old, the kind of place where ivy crawled up brick walls, and the floorboards creaked even when no one was standing on them. Franklin Hall had stood since the 1920s, originally a boarding house for minors before it was bought by the university and converted into a dormitory. Everyone called it Frankie's, and everyone knew which room to avoid. Room 313. It wasn't officially off limits, no sign taped to the door, no lock preventing entry, but students whispered about it in the cafeteria, their voices dipping lower whenever someone asked why the room stayed empty semester after semester. Some said a student had killed himself in there, others that someone had been murdered. There were stories about strange smells, scratching sounds, and lights flickering no matter how many times the bulbs were changed. Still, the official word was simple. No one wanted it. Until Michael arrived. Michael was a transfer student, mid-20s, older than the others on his floor. He'd come late in the semester, too late to snag one of the regular rooms. The housing office tried to put him off campus, but Michael refused. He didn't have the money for an apartment. He insisted on Frankie's. When they told him the only room left was 313, he smiled. "I'll take it." The grad student named Derek gave him the key with a look that wasn't quite a smile. "Don't say I didn't warn you." Michael didn't believe in ghost stories. He'd grown up with a drunk father, and a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on life had been hard enough without adding the supernatural into the mix. For him, fear was walking home past midnight in a bad neighborhood, or wondering if there'd be food in the fridge. A room with a bad reputation? Please, he'd lived worse. Still, when he opened the door, he understood why others might hesitate. The air was cold. Not cold like a basement, but unnaturally cold, as if the heat from the hall refused to cross the threshold. The window was stuck half shut, its glass cloudy with age. The room itself wasn't much different from the others. Narrow bed, battered desk, a closet that smelled faintly of mildew, but something about it felt used, like someone had just been there and stepped out for a cigarette. Michael dropped his duffel on the bed and told himself it was fine, better than sleeping in his car. That night, after unpacking and showering, he slid the bolt across the door and stretched out on the thin mattress. The hall outside was noisy, as always, music, laughter, the occasional slam of a door. But after midnight, it quieted down. Michael was on the edge of sleep when he heard it. A laugh. At first, he thought it was a neighbor. But no, it came from inside his room. He sat up, heart pounding, but the room was empty. The laugh had been short, sharp, unmistakably his own. He shook his head, telling himself it was a trick of exhaustion. He lay back down. Minutes later, it came again, the exact same laugh. Michael sat up so fast the springs groaned. He scanned the room. The closet door stood slightly ajar. He knew he had shut it. Slowly, he climbed out of bed and crossed the floor, every instinct screaming at him to leave it alone. He yanked the door open. Nothing, just the stale smell of old wood. Michael let out a shaky breath, shut the closet tight, and shoved a chair against it. When he turned back, the window stuck all evening was wide open. The curtains fluttered in the cold night air. That time, he didn't laugh, but something else did. It came from the bed, from the exact spot where he had been lying seconds before. A chuckle, low and wet, as though someone had stolen his own voice and bent it. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat upright in the desk chair, lights blazing, eyes locked on the bed until dawn bled through the grimy glass. The next morning, Derek knocked on the door to check in. He looked at Michael's pale face and dark circles. Rough first night? Michael wanted to deny it, to say it was nothing, but the words stuck in his throat. Derek gave a humorless smile. Nobody lasts in 313. They never make it past the first week. Michael forced a smirk. Then I'll be the first. But even as he said it, the echo of his own laughter seemed to linger in the stale air, like something hungry was waiting for him to close his eyes again. The second night was worse. Michael told himself he wasn't going to let some stupid noises scare him out of a free room. He had too much pride for that. But by the time the hall went quiet, he'd already propped the chair back against the closet and wedged his desk against the door, as if he needed a physical barrier between him and the unseen. He left the lights on. At around 2 a.m., he dozed in the chair. The hum of the overhead bulb buzzed in his skull until it blurred into half dreams. Then he heard the laugh again. This time, he didn't move. He kept his eyes half shut, steadying his breath, listening. The laugh came from the bed, a soft echo of his own voice. But it didn't stop there. The sound shifted. First his laugh, then a child's giggle, then a woman's chuckle, low and throaty, then something else, something animal, sharp and wet, like a bark that had learned to mimic human joy. Michael snapped upright. The bed was empty, but the mattress sagged. The dent wasn't there a moment ago. It deepened slowly, as if someone invisible had lowered themselves onto the sheets. Then another dent appeared beside it, as though two figures sat side by side, waiting for him to notice. Michael shoved back from the desk, heart slamming, but before he could scream, the dents vanished. The mattress lay flat. The room was silent. He didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, Michael was shaking from exhaustion. He tried to focus in class, but every time the professor spoke, he thought he heard his own laugh buried underneath the lecture, bouncing inside his head. His classmates stared when he muttered under his breath, trying to drown it out. That evening, Derek cornered him in the hall. "You lasted a second night," Derek said, eyes narrowing. "Not many make it that far." Michael forced a shrug. "Guess I'm tougher than I look." Derek didn't smile. He leaned closer. "Do yourself a favor. Don't let it get to night 3. Night 3 is when they start touching you." Michael scoffed, but he couldn't hide the way his stomach knotted. They. Derek glanced at the closed door of 313, then back at Michael. "You think it's just one?" "You'll see." That night, Michael barricaded the closet again and taped the window shut. He stacked every book he owned on the sill, desperate to stop it from moving. At midnight, the overhead bulb flickered. Once, twice, then it went out. The room plunged into darkness. Michael scrambled for his phone flashlight, but the screen refused to light. The battery had been full. Now it was dead, as if something had sucked the charge out of it. The dark was thick, suffocating. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, pacing the floorboards. He couldn't see, but he could hear them circling him, dragging just slightly, like someone with a limp. He whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then his own voice answered, right behind him, "You are." Michael spun, but his hand met only air. He stumbled back into the desk, knocking a stack of papers to the floor. Something brushed his shoulder, cold, deliberate, a hand. He bolted for the door, slamming his fist against the bolt, yanking it back, wrenching the door open. The hall was empty. He staggered out, panting, his skin crawling. Other students poked their heads out of their rooms, irritated by the noise. They stared at him like he was insane. Michael muttered an apology and slammed the door shut again, leaning against it with shaking arms. Inside the room, the light flickered back on. Everything looked normal. But when he looked at the bed, his stomach turned. Something lay there. It was his duffel bag, ripped open. His clothes had been pulled out and laid across the sheets. But they weren't just tossed. Each shirt and pair of jeans was stretched out carefully, positioned into the shape of a body. His body. The pile stared back at him with a hollow smile drawn in dust across the pillow. Michael rushed forward, scattering the clothes, shoving them back into the bag, his breath ragged. He felt like he was unraveling piece by piece, and then he saw it, scratched into the wall above the bed, faint and shallow but unmistakable. "We are you." That night, he left the room and sat in the common lounge until sunrise. He didn't care if he looked weak. Anything was better than being in there alone. By the fourth day, his mind felt raw. He stopped going to classes. He sat at the cafeteria table, head in his hands, until one of the older students slid into the seat across from him. She was pale, with messy black hair and tired eyes. "Her name was Lila. You're in 313, she said quietly. Michael looked up sharply. "How do you know?" "I was in there last semester." "I didn't last. Nobody does." Michael swallowed hard. "What happened to you?" Lila lowered her eyes. "They followed me out. I left Frankie's, but I still hear the laughter. I still feel them in my room. I don't think they ever let go." Michael leaned forward, desperate. "What are they?" Lila's lips trembled. "Not ghosts, not exactly. They're echoes, leftovers, people who lived and died in that room. They get in your head. They make you hear yourself until you can't tell what's real. And when they're done..." She trailed off. "When they're done, what?" Michael demanded. Lila met his eyes, her voice cracked. "You disappear, just like the others." Michael's chest tightened. For the first time, he felt a deeper horror than laughter or footsteps. Not just that he might die, but that he might vanish, swallowed whole, leaving nothing behind but an empty bed and another whisper in the dark. That night, as he sat on his bed with the words still echoing, the overhead light went out again. This time he didn't run. He whispered into the dark, "I'm not afraid of you." And from the closet, his own voice whispered back, "Then let us in." Michael didn't sleep. He couldn't. The words wouldn't leave him, "Then let us in." By morning, he felt brittle, like his bones were glass. Every sound made him jump. The slam of a door, the scrape of a chair. He kept hearing the laughter under everything, faint but constant, like his brain had been retuned to a new frequency. When he dragged himself to the bathroom down the hall, he saw it for the first time. His reflection didn't quite move right. He leaned toward the mirror, splashing water on his face, and when he raised his head, his reflection was still bent forward, smiling. Michael stumbled back, slamming into the stall door. When he looked again, his reflection was normal, but the smile lingered in his memory like a scar. By the time he returned to 313, Derek was waiting. "You look like hell," Derek said flatly. "Thanks," Michael muttered, trying to push past him, but Derek blocked the door. "Listen, you need to get out. I've seen too many people try to stick it out." "They don't last," Michael snapped. "What happens, Derek? They die? They vanish? Everyone talks, no one says the truth." Derek's jaw tightened. "The truth is, you don't want to know. But if you stay, you'll find out." Michael shoved the door open, ignoring him. Inside, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if the room had been waiting for him. That night, he tried a new tactic. He set up his phone on the desk, hit record, and aimed it at the bed. If something happened, at least he'd have proof. The hours dragged. He sat on the floor with his back to the wall, staring at the glowing red dot of the camera. The room was quiet, too quiet. For a moment, he thought maybe he'd finally scared it off. Then he drifted, eyelids heavy. He woke to the sound of whispering. Dozens of voices. Some sounded like him. Others didn't. Male, female, young, old. All overlapping, hissing words he couldn't understand. Michael lunged for the phone. The screen still showed it was recording, but the image wasn't of the room. It was of him. The phone showed him sitting on the bed, grinning, whispering into the camera, but he wasn't on the bed. He was standing beside the desk, staring down at the footage in horror. The recording figure looked up suddenly, as if aware of being watched. Its grin widened, showing too many teeth. The feed glitched, the screen cracking with static. Michael dropped the phone, heart slamming. It hit the floor and the screen went black. And from the bed, his own voice whispered, clear and sharp, "Trade places with me." Michael bolted. He tore into the hall barefoot, nearly colliding with Lila. She grabbed his arm. "You saw it, didn't you?" she hissed. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, gasping for air. Lila dragged him into the stairwell where the echoes of dorm chatter faded. She pulled a cigarette from behind her ear, hands trembling as she lit it. That's how they start. They make another you. They peel you away in pieces until you're hollow, and then they fill you with them. Michael swallowed. How do you stop it? Lila's face was pale in the flicker of the lighter. You don't. The room doesn't just feed on you, it keeps you. The only ones who escape are the ones who leave before night 3. After that, it's too late. Michael shook his head. There has to be a way. Someone has to know. Lila exhaled smoke, her eyes haunted. There was one guy. Senior named Harris. He made it longer than anyone. A month. Then one night, he started screaming. They found him in the basement. His nails were gone. His eyes too. Like he'd clawed them out himself. Michael's stomach lurched. Why? She stared at him. He said he wanted to stop seeing his reflection everywhere. Michael staggered back. He wanted to call her a liar, but her voice carried a weight that made denial impossible. That night, he tried to leave. He stuffed his clothes into his duffel, grabbed his bag, and headed for the stairs. But as soon as he stepped into the hall, the lights flickered and died. The building groaned, the air thickened, and then the laughter started. Every door on the floor rattled. Students screamed, but the sound was drowned out by Michael's own laugh echoing from every direction. High-pitched, low-pitched, stretched into inhuman tones. He ran for the exit, but the stairwell door wouldn't budge. He shoved his shoulder against it until his skin bruised, but it was like slamming into stone. The laughter swelled, shaking the walls. Michael dropped the duffel and bolted back toward his room, the only place left to go. When he burst inside, the door slammed shut behind him. The bed was occupied. Not with Dents this time. With a figure. It looked like him. Same hair, same clothes, same tired eyes. But the grin was wrong. Too wide, splitting skin. Michael froze, chest heaving. The other him tilted its head. You're late. Michael shook his head violently. You're not real. The grin widened. Neither are you. It stood, moving toward him with jerky, unnatural steps, like a puppet learning to walk. Behind it, the closet door rattled, and shadows spilled out, stretching long and thin across the floor. The smell of rot hit him, thick and choking. Michael pressed back against the wall, his throat dry, his voice breaking. What do you want? The copy of him stopped inches away, breath cold against his cheek. To take you home? And as it reached for him, the closet door burst open. Something else stepped out. It wasn't a copy. It wasn't even human anymore. Pale, eyeless faces pressed together. Dozens of arms fused into one body, staggering forward. A wet chorus of laughter spilled from every mouth. Michael screamed, and no one came. Michael's scream tore through the room, but the sound was swallowed instantly, devoured by the chorus of laughter pouring from the thing in the closet. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the stench of rot and mold. the buzzing of voices vibrating in his skull until his knees buckled. The copy of him didn't attack. It just stood there, grinning, watching, like it was savoring the terror. Behind it, a fused mass of bodies dragged itself into the room, pale arms clawing along the floor. Every face on its torso turned toward him, mouths opening wide in a symphony of his own laughter. Michael staggered to the desk, grabbing the chair, swinging it wildly. "Stay back," the copy tilted its head. "You can't fight yourself." The chair passed through it. Not like smoke worse. It went through with resistance, like sinking into water, and when Michael pulled it back, something clung to it. Black strands, sticky, writhing like worms, stretching before snapping off and retreating back into the figure. Michael dropped the chair, gagging. The fused thing lurched forward. Dozens of hands reached for him. He bolted for the window, ripping away the tape and books he'd stacked. He threw it open and leaned out into the night air. 3 stories down, concrete below, no ledge. Behind him, the voices hissed, "Jump." For a moment, he almost listened. Anything to escape. But then, through the panic, he remembered Lila's words. "They follow you out. They don't let go." If he jumped, it wouldn't matter. He'd die or worse, something else would crawl out in his place. He spun back. The copy was closer now, just a breath away. Its skin rippled, stretching like something underneath was pushing to get out. Michael shoved past it, sprinting for the door. He yanked at the knob. It held fast, hot beneath his palm, as if the wood itself was alive. Then bang, bang, bang. Someone was pounding from the other side. "Michael, open the door." Lila's voice. Michael's heart leapt. He pulled harder, screaming, "I can't, it's stuck." The pounding grew frantic. "Step away." He stumbled back. A moment later, the door burst inward, and Lila stumbled through, face pale, eyes wild. She clutched something in her hands, a bundle of burned sage tied with string. The laughter faltered. The fused mass shrieked, retreating slightly. The copy hissed, its grin cracking wider as its eyes bled black. Lila shoved the sage into Michael's hands. "Light it, now." He fumbled with his lighter, sparks catching. The room filled with smoke, bitter and acrid. The laughter turned to screams. The copy staggered, its skin peeling, its features flickering between his face and dozens of others. The fused mass writhed, pulling back toward the closet, clawing at the walls, leaving gouges in the plaster. Michael shouted over the den, "What the hell is this?" Lila's eyes brimmed with tears. They're everyone who lived here before. Everyone who stayed too long. They're echoes, but they're hungry. They want you to join them. The smoke thickened. The walls bled condensation, dripping black down the peeling wallpaper. The bed collapsed inward, springs snapping, mattress sinking like quicksand. The copy shrieked in Michael's voice. "You can't stop us. You are already one of us." Michael, trembling, shoved the burning sage into its chest. The thing howled, a sound that rattled the glass in the window. Its skin split open, light spilling from the cracks, until it burst into ash. The fused mass retreated fully into the closet, dragging itself into the shadows, leaving gouges that smoked as if the wood burned from the inside. The closet door slammed shut, shaking the whole building. Silence. Michael collapsed to the floor, coughing, clutching the burnt stub of sage. Lila knelt beside him, shaking. "We have to leave, now, before it comes back." Together, they stumbled out into the hall. The lights flickered, but stayed on. Students peeked from their rooms, confused, muttering about the noise. To them, nothing had happened. But Michael knew better. They left Frankie's that night. Michael didn't even take his duffel. He and Lila walked out into the cold, the dorm shrinking behind them like a shadow they barely escaped. Hours later, in a dingy diner off campus, Lila sipped burnt coffee with trembling hands. You can't go back, no matter what. The room remembers you now. Michael stared at his reflection in the dark window beside the booth. His face looked pale, hollow. For a moment, he thought he saw the grin again, stretched too wide, eyes too dark. He blinked, and it was gone. But when he lifted the coffee cup to his lips, the reflection didn't follow. It just sat there, smiling. Michael never returned to 313. Weeks later, a new transfer student checked into Franklin Hall. The housing office tried to push him elsewhere, but he insisted he needed the cheapest option. Derek gave him a key with the same tired warning. The boy laughed, shaking his head. "I don't believe in ghosts." And upstairs, behind the closed door of room 313, the laughter started again.